Lina's fingers trembled as she counted out the last of her cash, handing it to the grizzled shopkeeper at the flea market. The painting had called to her from the moment she spotted it, tucked between dusty trinkets and cracked pottery. Its surface shimmered with an eerie luminescence, the moonlit village frozen in time, its cobblestone streets winding toward a shadowy forest. But something about it unsettled her. The way the villagers' faces blurred as if they were turning to look at her, or the way the moonlight seemed too thick, like liquid silver pooling in the corners. The shopkeeper's grip tightened around her wrist as he leaned in, his breath reeking of stale tobacco. "Don't touch it at night," he warned, his voice grating like gravel. Before she could ask why, he shoved the painting into her arms and turned away, muttering under his breath. Back in her cramped studio, Lina hung the painting above her dingy sofa, her excitement outweighing her unease. As night fell, the village seemed to come alive. The painted moonlight glowed brighter, casting elongated shadows across her walls. She dismissed the creeping dread as exhaustion and collapsed onto the sofa, her eyelids heavy. But sleep didn't come. A whisper slithered through the silence, so faint she thought she'd imagined it. Then another. A chorus of voices, murmuring just beyond comprehension. Lina sat bolt upright, her pulse thundering in her ears. The whispers weren't coming from outside. They were coming from the painting. The once serene village now pulsed with something darker, the trees swaying in a wind that didn't exist. And for a horrifying second, she swore the shadowy figure standing at the forest's edge shifted, just slightly, as if sensing her gaze. Lina jolted awake with a start, her heart pounding as if she'd been running for hours. The studio was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. She rubbed her eyes, disoriented, and glanced at the painting she'd bought earlier. Her breath caught in her throat. The serene village was no longer empty. A shadowy figure now stood at its entrance, its form blurred yet unmistakably humanoid. The moonlight in the painting seemed to pulse, as if alive. Compelled by a curiosity that overrode her fear, Lina reached out, her fingertips brushing the canvas. The moment she made contact, the room lurched. A cold, invisible force yanked her forward, and she stumbled, her vision swimming. The studio dissolved around her, replaced by the eerie village from the painting. The air was thick with the metallic tang of rust, and the sickly sweetness of decay. The ground beneath her feet was unnaturally spongy, like damp earth that had never seen sunlight. A shiver ran down her spine as she realized she wasn't alone. The shadowy figure stood at a distance, its hollow eyes fixed on her. It didn't move, didn't speak, but its presence was suffocating. Lina took a hesitant step back, her pulse roaring in her ears. The village was wrong, too quiet, too still. The buildings leaned at impossible angles, their windows dark and gaping like empty eye sockets. A faint whisper slithered through the air, too soft to decipher, but it carried a weight that made her skin crawl. She turned, searching for a way back, but the path behind her had vanished. The trees she'd passed moments ago were gone, replaced by more of the crooked houses. The figure hadn't moved, but Lina felt its gaze intensify, as if it were savoring her panic. A single thought echoed in her mind: you shouldn't have come. Lina's breath came in shallow gasps as she stepped onto the cobbled path of the village, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. The sky was a perpetual twilight, neither day nor night, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to twist and dance at the corners of her vision. The village was eerily still, its timber-framed houses leaning inward as if whispering secrets to one another. Windows, dark and hollow, gaped at her like empty eye sockets. The villagers moved in slow, shuffling steps, their faces gaunt and their eyes devoid of life. They wore tattered clothing, their hands clutching at their chests as if their very souls had been scooped out. Each time Lina passed them, their lips parted in unison, their voices a chilling chorus: "You shouldn't have come." The words slithered into her ears, sending shivers down her spine. She quickened her pace, but no matter which alley or doorway she turned down, their hollow gazes followed her. A deeper shadow detached itself from the gloom, the figure she'd seen in the painting. Now up close, she could see his features, sharp cheekbones, a cruel mouth, and eyes like polished obsidian. He introduced himself as Elias, his voice a velvet whisper that coiled around her like smoke. "This is my domain," he said, gesturing to the village. "A place between worlds where time doesn't obey your rules." When Lina demanded to leave, Elias smiled, a hidden knife in the dark. "No one leaves," he murmured. "The painting takes what it wants, and it wants you." His words settled over her like a burial shroud. The villagers began to mirror her movements, their limbs jerking in grotesque imitation, their faces stretching into wide, unnatural grins. Panic clawed at her throat. She was trapped, just like them. And yet in the distance, she spotted a flicker of hope. A journal, half buried in the dirt, its pages brittle with age. Perhaps it held the key to escape. But as she reached for it, Elias's laughter echoed through the twilight, a sound as cold as the grave. Lina sprinted toward the village's edge, her breath ragged as the cobblestone path twisted beneath her feet like a living thing. The gate she'd seen moments ago was gone, replaced by a dense thicket of gnarled trees with branches that reached for her like skeletal fingers. Behind her, Elias's laughter slithered through the air, low and mocking. "There's no leaving," he murmured, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You're part of the canvas now, just like the others." The villagers, their hollow eyes fixed on her, began to move in unison with her steps. When she turned left, they turned left. When she stumbled, their bodies jerked in perfect mimicry. Their lips stretched into wide, unnatural grins, teeth too sharp, cheeks splitting at the seams. Lina's pulse pounded in her ears as she veered down an alley, only to find it looping back to the village square. A maze with no exit. Desperation clawed at her chest. She ducked into a crumbling cottage, its door slamming shut behind her. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and old blood. A dusty journal lay open on a table, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting was frantic, the ink smeared in places as if the writer had been trembling. "The painting feeds on choice," it read. "To break the cycle, you must offer something it cannot take willingly. But beware, the guardian will twist your mind before you can act." Lina's fingers trembled as she flipped the page, but the rest was torn away. Outside, the villagers' whispers grew louder, their voices merging into a single, relentless chant. "You shouldn't have come." The walls of the cottage groaned, the wood splintering as something, or someone, pressed against them from the other side. Elias's shadow stretched beneath the door, his form elongating, reaching. She had to move. Now. Lina's hands trembled as she clutched the journal, its brittle pages filled with frantic scribbles and diagrams. The ritual described was unnervingly simple yet horrifying in its implications. To break the curse, she had to offer a sacrifice. Someone else's life in exchange for her freedom. The words, "The painting demands blood," were underlined repeatedly, the ink smeared as if the writer had been weeping. She glanced around the village, the hollow-eyed villagers staring blankly at her, their lips moving in unison, repeating the same ominous warning. "You shouldn't have come." Elias materialized from the shadows, his grin widening as he observed her distress. The others all hesitated too, he murmured, gesturing to the villagers. "Look at them. Once they were like you, curious, desperate, afraid. Now they're part of the painting's tapestry, forever trapped in its decay." His voice dripped with cruel amusement. "But you still have a choice. Give me another, and you walk free." The moon above the village darkened, its pale glow leaching into a sickly crimson, casting everything in a bloody hue. Lina's pulse raced, time was running out. The air grew thick with the scent of iron, and the villagers began to twitch, their movements jerking unnaturally as they closed in around her. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Could she really condemn someone else to this fate? Then she noticed the journal's final entry, scrawled in a shaky hand. "The curse takes, but it can be turned. Offer yourself, and the cycle breaks." A surge of clarity cut through her fear. Elias's smirk faltered as Lina raised her hand, her fingernails digging into her palm until blood welled up. She smeared it across the painting's surface, whispering the incantation from the journal. The village trembled, the ground cracking beneath her feet. Elias howled in fury as the crimson moon shattered like glass, and the villagers' bodies dissolved into swirling shadows, their whispers fading into the wind. Darkness swallowed everything, until Lina's vision went black. Lina stood at the center of the village square, the blood-red moon casting an eerie glow over the crumbling buildings. Elias loomed before her, his form shifting between shadow and flesh, his hollow eyes boring into her soul. "You don't have to suffer," he whispered, his voice like rustling leaves. "Become the guardian, and the painting will obey you. You'll never fear the night again." The offer slithered into her mind, tempting her with power, with escape. But Lina clenched her fists, the journal's words burning in her memory. The ritual demanded a sacrifice, her own blood or another's soul. She tightened her grip on the jagged piece of glass she'd scavenged from a broken window. The villagers circled her, their hollow eyes wide, their mouths twisted into hungry grins. They were waiting for her to fail, to join their ranks. Elias's smile widened. "Time is running out," he taunted, gesturing to the moon, now dripping crimson like an open wound. Lina knew what she had to do. With a swift motion, she dragged the glass across her palm, hissing as blood welled up. She pressed her hand to the ground, staining the earth as she whispered the incantation from the journal. The village trembled, the air thickening with a deafening wail. Elias's face twisted in fury. "No," he roared, his form flickering like a dying flame. The villagers shrieked as their bodies dissolved into smoke, their whispers rising into a final, agonized chorus. The ground cracked beneath Lina's feet, the buildings collapsing into shadows. Elias lunged for her, his fingers grazing her throat, but he was too late. The world around her unraveled, the painting's hold shattered. She gasped as darkness swallowed her whole. Silence, then light. Lina jolted awake on the floor of her studio, the taste of rust still on her lips. The painting lay before her, its canvas now blank. She stumbled to her feet, heart pounding, and caught her reflection in the mirror. Her breath froze. Behind her, barely visible in the dim light, stood Elias's shadow. A jagged crack split the painting's frame, and a whisper coiled through the room, "You'll be back." And as Lina watched in mute horror, a single stroke of paint appeared on the canvas, the outline of a new village, waiting. Lina gasped as her eyes snapped open, the cold hardwood floor of her studio pressing against her cheek. She scrambled upright, her heart pounding, and stared at the wall where the cursed painting had hung. It was blank now, just a stretch of bare canvas, as if the village and its horrors had never existed. A shaky laugh escaped her lips. She'd done it, she was free, but the relief was short-lived. As she turned to the mirror to wipe the sweat from her brow, her blood turned to ice. Reflected in the glass just behind her shoulder stood Elias. His shadowy form loomed, his hollow eyes locked onto hers. She whirled around, but the space behind her was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, he was still there, his lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. A sharp crack split the air. The painting's frame splintered, the sound like bones snapping. A whisper slithered through the room, so faint she might have imagined it. "Hey, you'll be back." Lina stumbled backward, her breath coming in ragged bursts. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the canvas. At first it was just a smudge, a faint outline in the center. Then, stroke by stroke, the village began to reappear, the moon, the twisted trees, the crooked houses, and at its entrance a new figure took shape. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, desperate to call for help. But the screen flickered, and for a split second, Elias's face stared back at her. The air in the room grew heavier, thicker, as if the painting was breathing. Lina knew then that the curse wasn't broken, it had only begun. And next time, she might not wake up at all. Outside, the first hints of twilight blood through the window, and the whispers started again.